Thank you so much for that. MJ, we have Amal.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very insightful, pretty interesting. And I realized that we discussed self-confidence mainly on the organizational level or among adults. But I've been a public speaking teacher for the past 10 years, mainly working with children. And I realized that, I thought that us as adults, educated, could be great teachers. And I realized the best teachers in the world are children because they ask the most amazing questions that you have no answer for. And I've been thinking, for me, graduated from a public school, but by the time I started teaching, so I always had the idea that private schools have better education, they're expensive, they're fancier, So I would imagine the outcome of the education would be better or higher. But when I started teaching at the British School of Bahrain and got to interact with the most intelligent students, but I realized this gap that they are still lacking confidence. They have no English problem when it comes to speaking as a second language, but they just, literally shivering when they're talking. So joining this conversation made me realize if I really want to make change in the education system back home, what were there any the recent curriculum developments or even training programs to be adopted by schools at a younger age in order to build that confidence at a younger age in order to avoid that when we grow up? Have you encountered? I'm not sure who's going to answer the question, but if you ever researched some curriculum development when it comes to developing confidence for children, I really appreciate if you can share with me some of that.
I think we'll go to Randall first and then Kathleen.
Yeah, I haven't really done that kind of work, but I was the chair of a board of a school for kids, especially kids with special educational needs. And this is what I learned. When they came into the classrooms at the school, they were crushed by all the things that other kids say to them because they're different, because these are kids with special needs. And when they get into a classroom with a teacher who promotes their confidence and they don't get threatened by being made fun of all the time because they're different, and they start to focus on what they're doing and what they're learning, their confidence goes up dramatically. And again, so for me, that's partly then about the leader and also about the culture. And there are two things that sometimes people talk about that that expensive private education gives certain people, and that is an awful lot of confidence. Yes, you can do that. You're amongst the elite people here, and if anybody can, you can. Nobody's better than you. And it also gives them a great network of people to call on later on. But I think the culture thing for me is the big thing. With that right culture and the right leader in terms of building confidence for the kids.
Professor Kathleen?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I'm not a specialist. This would be developmental psych, and I haven't taken that since the class has been that for 30 years. But I will say one thing, Amal, if you probably know about the growth mindset, you probably know about this notion of growth mindset. And I think that's where you start, right? It's that children, like adults, right, want a chance to develop some mastery. And once they can do that, and I think you're right, having the courage to stand up even when your voice shakes, right, and speak, that kind of a notion, that helps, right? And so I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why there's a deficit there. I think that's a super interesting question. But the practice is the same, right? Screwing up your courage. How do you build self-efficacy? You remember a time when you did something similar, right? You focus on someone else who's not better than you and they were able to do it, right? These kinds of tricks. And then eventually just small steps and you jump into it. Yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but there was a recent book that was actually by a developmental psychologist, and what some of that research seems to be with regards to parents is just simply parents preventing kids from making mistakes, right? I think we don't want our kids to fail. So what do? We dive right in and stop them from, if they've got the first two math questions wrong, let me just fix this, or sort of the soccer, or you don't register them to things where they might not be as good. So one of the things you learn is not to make mistakes or not to fail. And so that then carries forward in sort of classrooms where they just don't want to say the wrong things or don't want to engage in an activity because fear of failure. So I think this was maybe a meta-analysis, but that seemed to be one of the predictors around sort of confidence. Again, I'm not a developmental psychologist, so don't quote me on it, but broadly, if I could take some liberty in interpreting that message, it seemed to be sort of kind of, when we hear about sort of helicopter parenting, I think that's sort of a kind of an extreme version of it, but it is sort of preventing kids from, not making mistakes.
What was the name of the book, Professor?
So this was a chapter. So I'm doing some work on sort of status and children. So how kids from various socioeconomic status have different attempts at status, whether it be sort of dominance or prestige. So this was an academic book. If I'm not mistaken, it was developmental psychology of child's leadership development or something to that effect. Okay. I could find the exact title of the book. I would not recommend the chapter as reading. So but I'm happy to, Amal, if you're really keen on reading some of the academic content.
Please,
on this.
That'll be a pleasure for me. That'll be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Do we have Prashant on the line still? So Prashant, and then maybe MJ, you could ask Ian his thoughts. So Prashant, you had a question for Professor Randall?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to know if there is an optimal, I think it has been addressed tangentially though, is there an optimal level of confidence which is just right? And anyway, how do you measure something so subjective? What is the right level of confidence?
Well, there are scales for measuring these things. And you can use anything from a narcissism scale to, which is obviously the very extreme end, but there's a nice, I did an article for the school's magazine about the difference between confidence and overconfidence, because it was specifically around narcissism. And so it's, and the distinction is typically in things like acknowledging the main thing was just acknowledging that there are things you don't know, or that it's not, you don't claim to be the world's expert on everything. But as we talked about, there isn't a single best place to be in terms of confidence. Depends somewhat on where you're at, depends on the position that you're in. We expect leaders to be more confident. You won't be influential if you're not. But at the same time, you're responding to how people are responding to you in a leadership role. And if people think that the confidence that you're expressing is right, appropriate, so doing maybe that 360 thing like Dan talked about, or just a regular 360, getting that kind of feedback, talking to the people down the hall, having the tea, like MJ said, getting some feedback, that can be a little bit hard at work. But your family oftentimes will be the ones willing to give you feedback if you're willing, if you're willing to risk it. There are all kinds of ways you can ask and find out what kind of confidence level you're expressing and whether that level is appropriate to what you're trying to achieve.
I have to say that I keep referring back to the 360 I did to see if I've tackled all of my deficiencies or whatnot. It's like, okay, what do I target next? Let's go back to the 360 and see what people said. So I think that is extremely useful in assessing yourself and in using to use for self-reflection, I think.
Yeah, and you don't need to go through a program to have a 360 if you want one. There are plenty, you can find them out there. Useful to have, and even just find a coach who can help you. But So lots of ways to do that. If you want the information, you can figure it out.
Okay. Ian, you had a question, I think, for the faculty?
Yeah, so thank you for organising this. I guess my question is, what specific advice would the professors have when self-confidence is low? And that might not necessarily be showing, but it could be internally, especially during situations of conflict. I have thought about, going around and trying to start an argument with everyone to stir up a bit of conflict, see how I deal with it. But there might be some better advice you can give me.
Nero.
Come on, Nero. You need to fix
Nicely done, Kathleen. So, Ian, you've asked the one person and comment on conflict. I'm not very good with conflict. I'm sure Randall could give me some sort of personality indicators that determine who approaches conflict and those that avoid it. So I don't have a very good answer in that context. I do try take sort of baby steps of not sort of walking away or avoiding it every chance I got. I'll give you in a different sense about sort of lacking confidence. I think this is shared by many, despite the fact that I'm a professor, I'm in front of lots of audiences. I hated public speaking, like in everything from high school to others. I avoided it like the plague. Even in group assignments, I would do everything else, but let someone else do the presentation. And one of the things I started doing, and I think we've covered this, is try a bit of it in sort of low risk environment. And what that could be, someone said, with sort of your dear friends, with colleagues, family, etc., as a way to kind of take that kind of baby steps. I'm a big believer in sort of these small nudges these small tweaks that compound to have very large impact. So one of my colleagues I knew very well earlier that many of you might know is Adam Grant, who is obviously very, very popular, does lots of TED Talks, etc. He's an incredible introvert. I remember at a conference where he was in a corner not speaking with anyone because he just did not like those social interactions. And one of the things he decided to do was he decided to sort of learn magic. And so he used to do these at talks where he would do these magic tricks. It was something that he liked, he was comfortable in. It allowed him to be ease with itself, and sort of there's lots of evidence of sort of bodily feedback that gives you confidence, and that kind of allowed him to be on stage before he sort of moved off from sort of doing magic to giving huge lectures and public speaking and various other bits. So he said, the confidence does oftentimes, it's not that you need to mimic the exact environment within which you're trying to build confidence. There's lots of spillover effect. So maybe find sort of space within sort of context or elements that you find comfort in as a way to sort of build up to these other domains that you lack confidence. But maybe Randall and Kathleen might have some additional advice.
Maybe they can. So we'll hear from you, Professor Randall, and then we'll go into the breakout rooms and I'll explain that after you speak. So Professor Randall, what were you about to say?
Some of it is common sense when it comes to that, when it comes to conflict. I mean, to try to stay rational, and stay ahead of your emotion. Easier said than done, but to focus on that usually helps. And to always keep in mind, what do I really want from this interaction? And because sometimes what you want is just, I remember having a very unpleasant interaction on a phone conversation with I would just say a large company trying to sell me, something I had a problem with, and in the end I realized what I really wanted was just for them to acknowledge that there was a problem, that what they had sold me didn't work, and I was open to any range of possible solutions. But when they started with, kind of a blanket, acknowledge, or a blanket kind of idea that you just don't share, you never admit fault, I think was kind of what they seem to be trained to do for whatever reason, then that's actually what escalated it. And it really, took me stepping back and saying, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we getting so wound up about this? Staying ahead of the emotion, and then saying, okay, but what do I really want? What am I really after here? And that helps to then focus so you don't get distracted by the emotion and by a particular statement maybe somebody makes. And if what you really want is something that you can get without engaging this conflict, maybe you can then just walk away. So for me, those are the kind of helpful approaches to remaining clear and confident in a conflict.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. Now we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and we are going to have Suresh and Professor Nero to stay in the main room, and then Professor Kathleen and MJ are going to go into one breakout room. Professor Randall and I are going to the other breakout room. You will be assigned at random, and if you want to pop back into the main chat, you can do so at any time by clicking the setting at the below of your Zoom screen. And then we'll all congregate again in about 20 minutes to wrap up and say goodbye and thank you to all of our fantastic professors. If the professors need 5 minutes, we can hold the fort whilst you get some water and come back. Thank you for your generosity. See you soon.
Yeah, now it's a free room. Floor is open to everybody. You can just shoot the questions, or you can raise the hands, and then I can. Okay, here we have Madhuraj. Madhuraj is a student or my cohort, EMBA LJ 2021. Madhuraj, can you start with your question, please?
Yeah, so my question was common to all the professors. What I believe from starting that teachers are going to give us a very good learning lifetime. And learning is this is my own philosophy. Learning is not one-day process. It is a continuous process which we are doing day by day. So you are the professors who suddenly switch to online classes without any knowledge transition of technology or any notice period, because when we are changing our type of job, we used to get a notice period like 10 days, 1 month. But here in the pandemic, all the professors suddenly used to switch into Zoom online classes, and we started to go into virtual environment. So I would like to integrate this learning with the first time when you started as a professor or as a lecturer or teacher. What are the continuous learning or any one learning which you want to share with everyone that has helped you in continuous, first time when you have faced a challenge, you started to work on that, and that learning also helped you in sudden transition, where we switched from classroom to virtual learning, but that one talent, one learning has helped you to deal with this challenging time as well. So one learning, one talent, one whatever quality you want to share with everyone.
This idea of sort of going digital, so this is across all universities. There's lots of resistance from professors for all slew of reasons, right? So if not for the pandemic, you asked us to shift towards online learning. Knowing faculty, we would have had 16 committees meeting over 32 times per year, and 5 years later we would have had what probably is sort of Zoom. Yet within 48 hours globally, everyone transitioned. Nothing like sort of necessity as sort of mother of sort of innovation. So there wasn't a choice. I personally cannot comment on it. I've done a lot of corporate events over Zoom, but certainly not teaching, because I'm not scheduled to teach till February. But a lot of my colleagues and especially some of the younger faculty have kind of embraced it, moved on, and done very well. I don't know if I think openness to ambiguity, dealing with uncertainty tend to be kind of two traits that are sort of called into the forefront these days. Randall is someone who studies a lot of personality. I think personality makes a difference. I'm a big believer that the social structure makes a huge influence as well, which is one of the reasons I believe that every single individual could be a great negotiator, regardless of sort of where you start. And I see two of my students here, so Ehab and Ramsey, different personalities, but I would say they're both now probably sort of rock star negotiators. So my belief is sort of in the social system. So Madhuraj, I can only speak myself, which is I try to stay grounded by not letting sort of things go to my head, and it's kind of hard for me to explain that beyond the fact I think it was always. Initially when MJ asked, are you kind of on the overconference or underconference camp? If I had to choose, I would probably go down the underconference, because I just, there are always smarter individuals that I meet on a regular basis that sort of push me and reiterate that, yes, I'm a faculty member, but I'm largely more likely to be a student from others who are far brighter than me that I can learn from. And that's both people I've not met, but also in the classroom. I've learned a ton from students. I wasn't kidding. There's been research projects that I've triggered as a result of conversation with students who sort of asked me a question. So I have a recent paper in sort of the pharma industry that came from an after-class conversation. And it's kind of one of the projects and papers I'm most proud of. And that didn't come from me, that came from a student's question. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. You explained very well. Yeah, that is going to give us a lot of experience for future.
Cool. Yeah,
Okay.
I think even your child agrees. Yay.
Yes, yeah, certainly.
Okay, so here we